from the All Indiana Podcast Network.
It's time for real conversation about the real issues that affect our communities.
Poverty, education, equality, and more.
This is Real Talk.
Real Talk with Reverend Charles Harrison.
Welcome to Real Talk on the All Indiana Podcast. I'm Reverend Charles Harrison, and on this episode, I will be talking to IMPD Deputy Chief of Investigations, Kendale Adams. Welcome back. This is Real Talk with Reverend Charles Harrison, and I am so honored today to have a friend, and he is now the Deputy Chief. Is it investigations now, or they changed the term?
No, that's it. Criminal Investigations
Investigation Division. Okay. But I've been knowing him for years, and he has moved up the ranks. I just think he is an excellent police officer and certainly a great advocate in our community. Deputy Chief Kendale Adams, welcome.
Thank you, Pastor Harrison. I appreciate that introduction. You know, as a lifelong resident of this city, I am very humbled by my service to the community. I happen to be in a position that has influence, but I also recognize that individuals like yourself, whose shoulders I stand on, have allowed me and elevated me to assume the position that I have today, and I'm thankful for it. But I hold it with a certain amount of humbleness.
Okay.
Because it is an important position. It's an important position for our community. It's an important position for our police department.
Well, let's talk. I've been doing a series of shows on the whole issue of black on black crime based on the Ebony magazine in 1979. That was the year I graduated from high school. I was on my way to Indiana University, so I'm telling how old I am.
Ooh-wee.
But it was also
Gas was 99 cents.
Yeah, it was. It
Okay,
was.
yeah.
It was. Yeah, but it was also 4 years after my brother had been killed in Louisville, Kentucky in 1975. So we were starting to really see that whole issue of violence, starting to come into the community with the guns and the drugs. So in 1977, Ebony magazine did their article based on the data from across the country where the black homicide rate was greater than the number of black soldiers that were killed in all of Vietnam. So it was just an alarming number, and in many major cities across the country. There were, the focus of the magazine was on causes, consequences, what the impact was on communities of color, and then the cures of it, or what we call solutions of it. And I kind of want to talk, in terms with you, this whole issue, because it seems like we've been dealing with this issue of what I call today urban violence for almost 60 years now. And it really hasn't gotten any better. Some say it's gotten worse, it's more spread. It used to be more prominent in many of our larger cities, LA, New York, Chicago. Back in those days, Washington, D.C., where we're seeing large numbers, Gary, Indiana, where we were seeing a lot of the violence. And when I got to Indianapolis in 1993, that didn't seem to be as big an issue then as it is now. So let's kind of talk about where are we at right now in Indianapolis, and then we're going to get into the broader conversation about this whole issue of what some call black on black crime, what I call urban violence.
Yeah, I think as we think about today, we're about 17% down in terms of total murders, total homicides. Okay. And about 16.8% down in murders. And so, we're about 154 versus 164 this time last year. Our non-fatals are down significantly. And so, I think when we think about violent crime, that's typically how we measure police departments. We measure violence within a community. The numbers are trending in the right direction for Indianapolis. Now, we all say there is no amount of there's no amount of success we're calling from that. But I think what it does indicate is it does encourage us as a community, as a law enforcement profession, as a social service profession, that we are trending in the right direction, and the things that we're doing now, the strategies that we're taking, the holistic approach, the more focused approach that the police department's taking, that those things are starting to take a hold. And I'd be amiss if I did not, recognize the significant investment that this administration has made in terms of policing, in terms of helping folks break down those barriers that prevent a person from being successful. I'd be amiss if I didn't recognize those efforts. It's interesting you talked about that historical perspective, which I think is kind of where you segue into. Right. What was it, 1963 when the Civil Rights Acts was signed? Was it 19? I think it was
19. Was it 1963, 1965, somewhere in there?
Yeah, 63, yes. 65. So you think about crime and how you think about, okay, so 63, 65. We pretty much not seen as humans, not seen as a regular citizen, and our closeness to each other, our connection to faith, our belief in the family was really evident until that period. Then we become free, so to speak. Right. And you start to see this proliferation of drugs, violence, broken homes. And then you hit crack cocaine era, 1990s, early 90s, late 90s, which exacerbated this reality that now we're free. We don't need each other as much anymore. We don't need the family. We don't need faith. We're free now. Right, we can go out and buy Cadillacs. We can go buy the house that we've always wanted. And I just wonder how that has impacted, for us as a people. I wonder how that's impacted our trajectory towards what we accept as a more violent community, as more violent people. I just wonder how that's...
Well, one of the things, and it's interesting that you bring that up, that I was looking at when I was reading the Ebony magazine of 1979, in August of 79, they listed what they considered were 7 causes of the violence that we were seeing in communities of color. Number 1 was the issue of racism and oppression. Number 2 was the high unemployment. Number 3 was drugs and addicts. And 4 was the urbanization and the breakdown in the family. 5 was the inadequate prison system. Number 6 was a double standard of justice. And then number 7 was media and crime. And Deputy Chief Adams, I started looking at that list and I said, man, it's not much different than today. Not much different. We could probably add a few more things in there, but it's really not that much different. And I guess I'm wondering why we haven't made much progress in a lot of those areas. And particularly, you probably see it a lot. What do you think is really driving the violence here in Indianapolis and nationally that you have seen maybe over the last 9 to 10 years? I know that in 2012, we ended the year with about 95, 94, some homicides or murders. What has changed in that time frame in your mindset where we've just seen the last 2 years, 200 plus? What's going on the ground that's different?
Well, I mean, you can't ignore, they talk about 5 or these 7 causes, and I think about it too. I think about how things shifted to where they are today, and I listed 6 kind of causes, so to speak. So education is one for me. As we look at whether it's whether it's a township school or whether it's inner city school or charter school, we have to have strong, fundamental, equitable education systems because that plays such an important part in a person's trajectory.
Right.
And so when you look at some of the school systems of the past, I think we looked at just getting kids through, kind of call them factories as opposed to investing in kids. And so as you look at the landscape today, as the educational system has, I would call reform, they really are looking at equity for every student and looking at ensuring that kids have access to quality education, not just passing a kid along, because of state funding. Then I look at, our faith-based. I look at the breakdown of the church. A lot of these individuals that we're dealing with in terms of violent crime, they have little connection with the faith-based community.
Right.
Now, maybe grandmama and them, an aunt, but them directly have little connection to the faith-based community. And then we look at family. When I look at family, I look at mental health. I look at drugs. I look at a breakdown of the family, and the list could go on. And let me be clear that I don't believe or I don't attest that you have to come from a two-parent household. I came from a one-parent household. My mother struggled with substance abuse, and I had a father that worked, all the time to support two young boys. But he understood the importance of getting us involved, and so he did a good job of connecting us with programs along the way that kept us out of trouble, so to speak. But then you look at government, and when I say government, I'm talking about law enforcement, city government, housing, poverty. You look at all those what we call barriers today that prevent people from obtaining a certain amount of success, whether it be unemployment, as was mentioned in the Ebony article, whether it be racism in housing, so you whether it be over policing communities, and so there are a number of things within government, but generally government failure. And then we look at what I call a false reality. In today's times, I equate that to this. When I was a kid growing up, we used to trade the football cards or the baseball cards.
Right.
Now, what's being traded is Instagram photos, glorifying money, glorifying violence, glorifying sex. And so then you add that to these other causes. Breakdown of family, mama who's working all the time. Now this kid is being raised and has access to so much information that it corrupts their thought process, which often takes them off a successful trajectory.
Well, you talked a little bit about growing up yourself. My mother and my father got divorced. I was probably 2 years old. Deputy Chief Adams. I don't remember my dad until I was probably 19. That's when I met him again. So all through from 2 years old, I had no recollection of my dad. Never had any connection to him. So I grew up pretty angry.
Yeah,
I grew up angry at my father, but I was blessed. I was blessed in the sense that I had a grandfather and two uncles that played a key role in my life. And then my mother remarried and had a wonderful stepdad. And to me, all of those men played an important role in my life.
Pastor, do you ever think about what your life would have been like had you not had that strong grandfather, had you not had that bonus dad? I mean, you ever think what your trajectory would have been?
I do. I might have ended up like my stepbrother because my stepbrother, good young man, but he was easily influenced. And he was influenced by the environment in which he grew up in. I grew up in Jeffersonville. He grew up in Louisville, Kentucky. So we were maybe 25 minutes away from each other, but he was on the other side of the Ohio River. And the environment there was much different. And see, Deputy Chief Adam, I think a lot of kids are just the victims of their environment and upbringing.
Absolutely.
And they get off on the wrong path at an early age, and some we are never able to save, unfortunately.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
I mean, you're exactly right. I mean, when you look at communities across our country, no matter if it's Indianapolis, it's another city, you name it. There are a small subset of individuals that, unfortunately, for a number of reasons, whether it be mental health, whether it be, breakdown of family, that we're not going to be able to save. The only thing that's going to save them is incarceration, and that's the reality of a free society. I tell people all the time, my job is not to stop every murder. My job is to have detectives that investigate them and hold people accountable, but it's not to stop every murder. We do want to decrease it, and we do want to push forward programs and initiatives that help reduce homicides. But when we think about the trajectory of some of these young people, that's why I say education is so important. And I wondered, for me, it was critical that I had, a third grade teacher that saw something in me. I didn't know what it was. She saw something in it and said, hey, I'm going to work with you to get this math problem. I think what we have today is you have a system that doesn't individualize to a specific kid, and that kid gets further and further left behind. And then it's inevitable because they don't have grandpa or they don't have a stepdad that they would end up within the criminal justice system or in the life of violence.
One of the difference in the 1970s, I would say, too, when it came to education, a lot of the people I grew up with graduated from high school, but they had an option that doesn't seem to exist today. They could work in a factory, they could work for, a Ford, Chevrolet, and good jobs and make, middle class, income, and they tended to live well. A lot of people I graduated from high school, they didn't go to college like I did, but they ended up with good jobs, working at Ford or wherever, Allegheny, and they ended up with good jobs. Those jobs are not available today like they were then. So education is even more important today than it may have been in the 1970s when I was in school.
Yeah, that's a great point. I mean, because my dad worked at Ford for 50 plus years, and I would say that those jobs are available, but I think our reality, going back to that false reality, our reality of what it means to be successful is different. So, working a minimum wage job for some of these kids, that's not going to get them the car that they want or the house that they want. It doesn't line up with their reality of what successful looks like. And so that's why.
So what is their reality of success based on? Is it the video games? Is it social media? I mean, what is
all
it?
That.
All of that.
All of that, from videos to social media to their friends. When you look at that, it's typically materials. Material things. Whether it be the nice car, the nice house. So I think their reality has been warped by access. Back then. You talk about the 1970s, we didn't have the internet, right? We didn't have social media. And those things aren't going away.
That's true.
I do recognize that. But I think what that has done is change, it really has changed a paradigm from what we determine is successful. Because now I can look at a video, see Snoop Doggy Dogg or, see the NFL players driving these nice cars, and those are the things that they want. And so in order to get that, you're not going to get that working at McDonald's. There are plenty of jobs today that pay minimum wage. But when I go to the neighborhood, when you go to the neighborhoods, these kids will tell you, I ain't working over there. That pays minimum wage. I want some cash. I want some cash in my pocket that I can go buy me that whip with them rims and move in an apartment. With no garage, by the way. So I think their reality, though, for a lot of young people, has been warped by our acts. I think about it all the time. I mean, we're having this conversation in my own family. Do I give one of my daughters a phone? And my fear is not so much that she's going to do something that's wrong, but I guess my main fear It's just the access.
Right.
The access and how a young mind can't process quite,
Right.
what is reality versus what's not reality.
Right.
TikTok,
Right.
for example.
Right.
You get on there and you see all these people fighting.
Right.
And so, at a 13, 10-year-old, they start thinking, well, that's reality.
Right. Right.
And so, I say all that to say, I get it. Social media is not going anywhere. It's going to be here forever. I get it. But we have to start to have conversations within our own spheres of influence about what is reality and what is not reality. And you still, I don't care if it's 1979 or it's 2022, you still have to work hard to get the things that you want.
That's true.
That's just reality.
Well, that's true.
And you're going to struggle.
Yeah,
and you're going to fail. Because I've failed many a times.
This is Real Talk with Reverend Charles Harrison. And my special guest today is Deputy Chief Kendale Adams from IMPD. One of the things that really struck me in the Ebony magazine, when we talked about it, was when it talked about some of the cures. It really focused on those individuals that they considered was terrorizing the neighborhood. And I know there's been this debate in the black community about the judicial system and the inequities in it. And I think all of us can agree that what we tried to do, on the war on drugs wasn't really successful, particularly for nonviolent offenders. We were locking up a lot of addicts.
Yeah, that's exactly right.
Yeah,
exactly right.
And giving them long prison terms, that had devastating consequences on the black family, black community. But I think the debate is now in trying to fix the system. Have we gone too far in the other way when it comes to repeat violent offenders, the whole controversy over the low bail for particular individuals who have been in and out of the system with repeated violent felons, and particularly those who have also been arrested and rearrested for domestic violence. So where are you at on that, on that whole issue? Because I know it's controversial in the community. We haven't had what I feel a good conversation in the black community about this.
Yeah, I mean, I think we need to have a significant conversation about, what does restoring someone look like?
Right.
And is our prison system doing that?
Right.
I would argue for some it is. I would argue for others it's not.
Okay.
Because it is not uncommon for us to see someone who has committed a murder, the taking of someone's life. It is not uncommon for us to see them have touched the system at least 3 different times. We had a problem analysis done in 2018 that looked at our homicides and our non-fatal shootings. We looked at both victims and suspects. And so what came out of that was, what I call that focus for who we need to be focusing on.
Okay.
When I say we, the criminal justice system.
Right.
And there was 18 to 34 was that sweet spot. But what also came out of that was typically your suspects and to some degree your victims had touched the criminal justice system, 3 to 4 times, whether it be for low level or be for more significant.
So how early? Does that include juvenile just as adults?
Yeah, 18 to 34 was
18 to 34. Okay.
It included all victims and suspects,
okay,
ranging the gamut. We often talk about juvenile crime, and let me just pivot there for a minute.
Okay.
Juvenile crime is something that we need to continue to have the conversation about, and we need to continue to work towards prevention. But the reality is, even today's crime trend, when you look at the vast majority of our murders, they are in that 18 to 34-year-old age group.
Okay.
Now, media and everybody else will jump on juveniles. They've seen a rise, and that may be true. Right. But even if you dealt with that, you still would have a significant number of murders in that 18. The vast majority of your murders will be in the 18 to 34, and that's based on research. So I say that to say that, when I look at this totality of violent crime, we as police officers, we as the criminal justice system, we do need to have conversations about, what does it look like to restore someone? And at what point do we say, okay, yeah, you committed, a domestic violence, and yes, you deserve to get, to seek counseling for that. But at the same time, you have to pay a price for that. Mm-hmm. We have to say as a society, it is not acceptable to hit someone, whether it be male, female, shoot someone. Mm-hmm. Those are things that we have to say as we continue to try to deal with violent crime, that those are unacceptable. And there should be significant penalties for that. Now, if you're shooting somebody in self-defense, that's why we have this beautiful criminal justice system that will allow you to argue your innocence. Right. But if you're found guilty by, our criminal justice system, which I'm not saying is perfect, but if you're found guilty, there's enough evidence there to assume your guilt. We have to have a significant conversation. Are the appropriate sentences being, are the appropriate fines and punishment align with what we are seeing in terms of violence today?
Are you seeing, and part of, sometimes, the work I do with 10 Point, we hear individuals who may say to us, well, we gave y'all opportunity to do something with Junebug, but y'all let him back out. Now it's our turn. And part of my concern is, and this is more of a conversation probably with a whole judicial system, the whole concept of street justice.
Oh, yeah. Retaliatory. We call it retaliatory violence.
You call it retaliatory violence. We call it street justice.
Yep.
And to
it's
me,
real.
that's real. Yeah,
it's real.
It's real.
Let me put this number out there.
Okay.
Most people think that murders are connected to drugs.
Right.
Or robbery.
Right.
And a good portion of them are.
Right.
But I'm going to be honest with you. What we see, or what we continue to see year over year, is a significant number of our murders are retaliatory violence. They are, hey, you shot my brother 5 years ago.
Right.
I see you at the club.
Right.
Now I'm going to shoot you.
Right.
And end up killing you. So arguments, conflict, not dealing, again, with the access, to weapons that we have in not only in our state, but in our country. People not knowing how to deal with conflict, not understanding the concept. I always say this, when we have a murder, you lose two people.
Right.
You lose the victim.
That's
and
true.
you lose the suspect.
That's true.
Because they're going to go to jail for a very long time. So I say all that to say that a number of our violent crime is connected towards what you would call street violence or retaliatory violence, arguments, conflict. Again, you shot my brother 5 years ago. I'm gonna shoot and kill you. So yes, and that's because oftentimes when we have a non-fatal shooting, depending on their history. The penalty for that may be, very what some would consider soft. It may not be as much time as people think. So we have to continue to have conversations about with our legislators about, what are the appropriate penalties for violent crime. I'm not talking about very low level offenses. We need to continue to decriminalize those things.
Right.
Because I agree.
Right.
If I'm locking somebody up for driving while suspended, and all they're trying to do is get to work, that's a problem.
That is a
and
problem.
we need to continue to have that discussion as well. But if we are going to effectively deal with violent crime in our community, we cannot ignore that portion of the criminal justice system.
So from your perspective, Deputy Chief, from 2000 to 2022, are we producing more trigger pullers out there today than we were back then? Or were they not on the streets in the numbers that they are today compared to back then?
That's a good question. Are we producing more trigger pullers? Well, I mean, if you look at our crime trends, our murder numbers, I mean, there certainly are more trigger pullers out there. I think or
how many have committed multiple murders and maybe only got prosecuted for one?
Right. How many have beat a murder charge?
Right.
There's not many of those.
Okay.
You don't see too many times. I'm not saying it never happens, but it's not. It's a rare. It is a more low frequency occurrence that someone has committed a murder, commits another murder. Now, it has happened. I think I've read at least 2 cases where the person was charged with murder earlier in their life and then, beat that charge or.
But maybe we need to have a conversation. We hear on the streets that so-and-so may have shot and killed 2 or 3 people and they only got caught for one of them.
And now that I see what you're saying.
Yes.
Yeah, no, that's probably true.
Right.
Because oftentimes when you shoot someone,
Right.
I don't know, I never shot and killed someone.
Right.
I don't know what goes through their mind, but
Right.
I'm sure if they're not caught
Right.
on those earlier murders, it just emboldens them.
Right.
They get street cred, so
They
to
get
speak.
street cred,
They-
yes.
This is our muscle right here. And so we hire him to go do all these different shootings. And we've had a couple cases since I've been in the seat where, the individual was shot and killed, but then when you track back, you find out that they were responsible for 2 or 3 murders that we, just didn't get enough evidence to identify them and eventually arrest and subsequently charge him. So, that's where that whole snitching and, community cooperation comes
Right.
in. I think what's different today is, luckily we have technology
Right.
that's getting much better
Okay.
with cameras and
Okay.
LPRs. And
Yes.
so that's helping fill the gap.
Okay.
But in addition to that, we have seen community cooperation go up.
Okay, that's good.
I was
good to
just
hear.
at a, and I know I've been talking forever.
Oh, no, go ahead. You're good. You're good.
I was
We're
just
good.
at
You're good.
a memorial service our chaplains put on every year for homicide victims, in this year thus far. And, one of the things that, as I reflected, there were probably at least a good 25 people there representing loved ones that have been killed. And, I just reflected on the grief that those families feel. But what encouraged me was as I was standing there, 3 separate families came up and just said they were just so thankful for the detective assigned to their case. Not necessarily, a couple of them were still unsolved.
Right.
But they were so thankful for the connection that the detective made with them over the course of this tragic investigation. And I say that to say that those relationships are important.
Okay.
Because
Okay.
oftentimes they're connected to someone else that's shot and killed, or they're connected to a suspect that wants to turn themselves in. One of the shoulders I stand on is Deputy Chief Benjamin, and I typically have breakfast with him usually once a month. And he was known for that, right? Knowing these families and them trusting him enough to then give him the information. And so, it's been a big emphasis for me while I've sat in the seat. Not necessarily me doing it, but what I expect my detectives to do as they try to work with these families. But my point in all that was that we need to continue to build that cooperation with the community so that they trust us, because we don't want an individual who's had 2 or 3 murders on him walking around our streets. We want to put those people away. We want to give those families justice. They deserve justice just like everybody else. And oftentimes we need that missing link, that community cooperation.
Could you touch on that, elaborate on that a little more? Because I know there are a lot of people that we come in contact with that have information. They really do have information, but they are afraid that if they give it, they're going to become the next victim, because the suspect will know it's them, or him, or his friends, or if he's in a clique or gang, they will become the next victim, and I don't believe that's true, but a lot of people believe that, and it's difficult sometimes. They may tell us who did the killing, but they won't come forward and tell law enforcement.
Yeah, one of the obituaries I carry with, it's in my car right now, I carry with me is Mr. Nunn. And this is even before I was in this seat.
I remember him.
You remember Mr. Nunn that was killed?
I remember him.
Came forward.
Yes.
So my thought there is, that is a reality. It is a reality that that retaliatory violence for coming forward. But when I look at an elderly gentleman like Mr. Nunn who had the courage to do it anyway, in face of that, and ultimately lost his life, it's just hard for me to understand why you wouldn't want to give justice to someone else who deserves it.
Right.
We have programs in place. I know there'll be arguments on both sides. It's not enough. I get that.
Right.
But we do have programs in place. We are sensitive to that. My detectives, the prosecutor's office, we work very hard with them to ensure that individuals are not identified in probable causes that are released to the public. Now, having said that, the name will be in the probable cause that's available. Right. That's the way our system's built.
Right.
It will be available to the defense. But we work very hard to ensure that we use initials or whatever we can do. We have the witness assistance program that we've relocated people, use alarm systems. Our victim assistance has been very steadfast, along with the OPHS and the prosecutor's office. We have Crime Stoppers, as you know, and I know some folks don't. Just real quick about crime, when you submit a tip to Crime Stoppers, it's got to go all the way up to Canada, cleansed of everything, and then sent back down. Some of our detectives said, I was just talking to a detective the other day in homicide, and he said, we really need to have a conversation about, is Crime Stoppers still, is it still a viable option for people? But the bottom line is that is a real fear. But I equate that to the fear that many communities feel from individuals that they know have murdered someone and still walking around. I put your life is in jeopardy if you've allowed someone to kill 2 or 3 people and still walk around your community.
One of the things, a couple of questions. Most people are wondering, where are all of the guns coming from, the unlawful guns? Where are they coming from? And it seems like to me they're getting younger and younger with them. Mm-hmm. Where are they coming from? Why is there such a proliferation of unlawful guns on the streets, in the hands of individuals? And some, I say, tend not to have any regard for the sanctity of human life, their life or anybody else's. So, I don't know if you're aware of the story yesterday in Philadelphia where young men were leaving a football scrimmage at a high school, and 5 individuals were ambushed, shot, and one died, 14-year-old. Yep. Yeah. I mean, what do we do with individuals that young who have guns, and where are they getting them from?
Yeah, so, crime guns, what we call crime. One, we live. Let me just kind of set the stage. We live in a country where gun ownership is inherent as being an American.
Right.
Obviously, it's built into our Constitution. So there are more guns in our country than any other nation across this world. So the access to guns is prevalent.
Okay.
Crime guns are passed from individual to individual to individual. They often are stolen. They often are legally purchased and then given to, you think about here in Indiana, if I want to sell a gun to someone, I don't have to do a criminal record check. I don't have to do anything.
Okay.
I can just go sell that gun to, this convicted felon, domestic violence person. So my point is the availability of guns in our country is prolific, and we're not going to, obviously the Constitution doesn't allow us to, but we're not going to get rid of all guns. What we have to do is, and then you think about lowering the gun ownership to 18 now to legally possess a gun. So we have to be very strategic in getting crime guns off the street. And that's the work that our crime guns does here, that regional approach that has detectives, not only from IMPD, but ATF, Boone County, Avon, that really tries to track those guns. So we have partnership with the crime lab that test fires those guns. Then it's sent to a correlation center run by the ATF, and then we try to. They send back what we call leads to our detectives, and then we try to go trace down those individuals that are responsible for being the trigger pullers. So we have to use more data.
Okay.
And we have to be more focused on those trigger pullers. Because again, these guns are once they do a shooting, typically they pass it on to somebody else. So we have to be able to interrupt that cycle and try to get that gun out of that vicious cycle that it typically is in. But that, the reality is, I think last year IMPD took in some 3,000 guns. That's
Wow.
both crime guns. That's both guns that were recovered.
Right.
So and that's pretty typical. Every year we're taking in some 3,000 some odd firearms just here in Marion County. So, or here in IMPD. So, that's a continual we'll always have to face because the prevalence of guns and being adherent to being an American, I don't know that we'll ever get rid of guns.
What I'm seeing on the street with 10 Point, we are seeing a growing number of females now with guns.
Oh, absolutely.
We broke up an altercation at 29th and MLK where there was about to be a shootout between females. Are we seeing the number of female crimes increase in Indianapolis?
You think about, just like the police department, we have to adapt and overcome. Well,
Okay.
criminals do the same thing.
Okay.
People, so these prohibited individuals that know they can't carry guns are giving the guns to the females. And so typically you don't see females involved in a lot of violent crimes. So typically they're not prohibited. But what happens is they get into an argument like you saw at 29th and MLK. Well, again, access the gun. I'm not going to keep arguing with you. I'm going to turn around and shoot you.
Right.
That's the mentality. So again, we have to continue to have conversations with our young people about what does effective conflict resolution look like, and understanding that particularly for females, I see this all the time where they make that decision to pull that trigger, and then when you track back and you talk to them, they'll say, "I didn't know that this would change my life forever."
Wow.
And so we really have to have, again, going back to that, my causes, that false reality, that once you pull that trigger, you have changed your life forever.
Wow.
You should not hold a gun for a boyfriend or a friend in the community, so that, because that can impact you. It can have a deadly, what normally would have ended in just a couple of fisticuffs, because we got guns. And maybe it wasn't, it's not something I bought. It was given to me by my brother or somebody to hold on to. Because we have that, now that's what, that's our way to resolve this conflict. And
one of the final questions I want to ask.
It's almost over?
Well, we got a little bit of time. Almost. We're going back. But I think some of us are wondering. The city's growing. Certainly the city's growing. Dynamics on the ground is changing. Our cities like Indianapolis, and we have seen 200 homicides the last 2 years. We may get there this year. We may not. I don't know.
Lord willing, we don't.
But the question is 200 the new norm for Indianapolis now?
I can't believe that.
Okay.
I mean, we're coming out of a unique time in terms of the pandemic. Other cities have seen violent crime raise. They've seen slight reductions, 2 to 3%, whereas Indianapolis has seen a greater reduction. So I have to believe that won't be the new norm. I have to believe the efforts being made both in enforcement within the criminal justice system, within our social service programs, that we will not see a new normal of 200 plus homicides. I think this year we're going to be under. I mean, obviously, nobody likes to predict that, and we still have 3 months to go. I just believe in my heart of hearts that our community is tired.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, just think about it.
Right.
200 families impacted by violence, and I think folks in our community have said enough is enough. I think our police department has gotten smarter. I think our criminal justice system is continuing to tweak the system to identify those trigger pullers. I think our social service programs have been phenomenal. I mean, really been phenomenal for years, but really we're starting to see programs like 10 Point take hold in communities outside of their normal footprint. This thought that we have to have people on the ground during the times that these incidents occur, which is typically at night. I have to believe that all of those efforts, faith-based, OPHS, and identifying individuals and trying to redirect their lives before violence occurs. I have domestic violence. I have to think all of those things will make a difference in our community. I don't know what that new number is going to be, but I certainly believe in my heart of heart that it won't be 200.
Well, I would say this. In working with the people at the North Shadeland Lions and Bean Creek and Garfield, I probably never thought I would see that. But I see residents all across the city now who are out on the street doing community policing and doing their part to help, working in partnership with other groups and law enforcement. I think that has certainly been encouraging.
I agree.
And we're getting more neighborhoods and apartment complexes. We're hearing from apartment complexes, hey, can we do something like that in our apartment complex where we have seen a lot of violence? So, we can't, 10 Point can't do it, but what we can do is train other people to do it in their own neighborhood.
That's right. Yeah. You were up in Fort Wayne training some folks.
Yeah, I was up in Fort Wayne. So. I will be in Anderson tomorrow.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, I'll be in Anderson
and I'll just
tomorrow.
say, Pastor,
yes.
I mean, to me, that's what makes the difference.
Right.
Being on the ground level.
Right.
When these kind of hot zones are creeping up, I think to me, I've seen that over my career, and I think that does make a difference. Getting the OGs out there with individuals that because people say, well, what can I do? Right. I mean, you can walk. You can definitely walk your neighborhood or come walk in a neighborhood where violence is prevalent, but it's going to be tough. Right. Because if you're going to change some of these folks' mind, you have to develop a relationship.
That's true.
You do. I mean, if you say, I used to say this all the time when I was mentoring, I could get 20, 25 guys together Monday through Friday, pretty much any time. Mm-hmm. But if I say, hey, can you come out on Saturday night? Oh man, I got to hit the links, man. I got 18 holes to get in on Saturday. I'm not going to have time to do that. Well, these young people, they need that. They need you to be able to be available and invested in them, and they have to know you care.
That's true.
Because if you don't, they will find Pookie in them on the street corner that's available. That's going to invest in them.
Right. One final question: the role of social media. You kind of talked about it. Is law enforcement monitoring that a lot more today than used to, and probably I know we do.
Absolutely.
Absolutely.
I'm so proud of Chief Taylor and Chief Bailey that have allowed us to, and Chief Cunningham, who runs our admin division, who's allowed us to acquire some 14 analysts that are, looking at social media, not only from an investigative standpoint, but really from a data standpoint, sometimes just seeing what's out there. And so it's a major part of what we use to help, determine some of these cases. It continue to be an important footprint going forward.
Yeah, Reverend Rivers from Boston, National 10 Point leader, he says social media is the new street corner.
It is. Yeah. I would agree. Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of information that you garner from what, and again, it goes back to that reality. Right. It's that false reality that they're setting up for themselves, that, proliferation of violence and furtherance of violence through social media. So, yes, to answer your question, we watch it pretty vigorously in terms of helping us solve some of these more violent crimes. Well, now, it's not to say we're just sitting around watching people's social media. We're trying to be focused. Trying to be focused. So.
Well, thank you so much, Deputy Chief Adams, for joining me today on Real Talk. We'll get you back here maybe around the first of the year after this year. But thank you so much for joining me. I'm Reverend Charles Harrison, and this has been Real Talk. Join me next time as I bring more real talk about the real issues that affect our communities here in Indianapolis and across the country. Be sure to follow and subscribe to this podcast and share on Facebook and Twitter. This is Reverend Harrison. I pray that you have a blessed and wonderful day.
This is Real Talk with Reverend Charles Harrison.
Be sure to like and subscribe to this podcast.
And be sure to check out other great podcasts on the All Indiana Podcast Network.
Online now at allindianapodcast.com.